Each year in Canada, tens of thousands of criminal investigations begin quietly, long before they become headlines. Most are resolved, some are not. Our podcast examines the evidence, the legal thresholds, and the decisions that shape what happens next. This is Northern Dark, True Canadian Crime. Documented, structured, and examined without noise. It's almost midnight. The house is quiet, the lights are off, and a bedroom door is closed. In the dark, a phone screen lights up. At first, it's nothing unusual. A message from someone in a gaming chat, a username, a shared interest. The kind of interaction that feels harmless, even ordinary. The conversation moves quickly, shifting from a public server to a private message, from game strategy to personal questions. How old are you? Are your parents home? Can we talk somewhere more private? The shift is subtle, not aggressive, not obvious. It feels like connection. Across Canada, police say this is often how it begins. Not with force or threats, but with attention, validation, and belonging. By the time the manipulation becomes clear, the conversation is already somewhere else, encrypted, isolated, and difficult to trace. This isn't about outrage, it's about understanding the pattern. Because most online exploitation in Canada doesn't begin in dark alleys. It begins with a notification your child answers alone. Across Canadian investigations, the pattern follows a predictable progression. Online grooming is not spontaneous. It is structured. Cybertip.ca defines it as a process used by offenders to sexualize an online encounter with a child, explaining that offenders use a multitude of techniques to manipulate perceptions of children so they comply with their sexual requests or demands. That manipulation is rarely aggressive at the outset. It is gradual. The first stage is targeting and assessment. Offenders often cast a wide net in accessible digital spaces, gaming servers, live stream chats, open group channels, and observe engagement patterns. Who responds quickly? Who remains online late at night? Who appears socially isolated? The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has warned that violent online groups operate in very accessible online spaces, such as social media platforms, applications, and online games, emphasizing that recruitment does not require hidden networks. The second stage is normalization and bonding. Attention becomes consistent. The tone becomes affirming. Adolescents are particularly responsive to peer validation due to developmental sensitivity in reward pathways of the brain. Digital environments intensify that response through instant feedback, likes, and notifications. What appears to be harmless conversation begins to create what psychologists describe as intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable bursts of attention that strengthen attachment. At this point, the interaction often migrates to private messaging. The Mounties have publicly warned that offenders move conversations into private and encrypted spaces to reduce oversight. The shift is presented as intimacy or exclusivity. Let's talk somewhere just us. This creates separation from peer visibility and adult monitoring. The third stage is boundary escalation. Requests begin small, personal details, private thoughts, mild flirtation. Each request builds compliance momentum. Once a young person agrees to something mildly uncomfortable, the psychological barrier to the next request lowers. This incremental escalation is deliberate. Statistics Canada data show significant increases in police-reported incidents involving intimate images and online extortion over the past decade. In many sextortion cases documented by Canadian police, the turning point occurs immediately after an image is shared. Once digital content exists, the dynamic changes. The fourth stage is leverage and control. The Mounties describe sextortion as an online crime affecting youth across Canada, where offenders threaten to distribute intimate images unless further demands are met. These demands may involve additional images, recruitment of peers, financial payment, or compliance with increasingly degrading requests. Shame becomes the central mechanism of control. Police advisories repeatedly emphasize that victims often feel responsible or fear punishment. That fear delays reporting, and delay strengthens the offender's leverage. There is also a documented secondary pattern in some investigations: coerced recruitment. Youth who are threatened may be pressured to identify or contact other vulnerable peers. This expands harm outward and complicates intervention, particularly when cases fall under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Time compression is another critical difference between online and offline grooming. What once took weeks of proximity can now unfold in hours. Offenders may initiate simultaneous conversations with dozens of youth across multiple platforms, increasing efficiency and probability. Platform features themselves can unintentionally facilitate concealment. Disappearing messages, secondary accounts, private group channels, anonymous usernames. None of these tools are inherently criminal, but in the wrong hands they reduce traceability. Across Canadian warnings and investigations, the sequence remains steady: open access, private migration, emotional validation, isolation, escalation, and leverage. The names of groups may change, the apps may evolve, the psychological mechanics do not. And understanding those mechanics, not just the headlines, is what allows parents, educators, and investigators to interrupt the sequence before coercion becomes control. The progression is methodical. The vulnerability it exploits is human. Adolescence is a period defined by identity formation and heightened sensitivity to peer evaluation. Developmental research shows that teenagers experience stronger neurological responses to social approval and rejection than adults do. Digital platforms amplify that sensitivity. Notifications arrive instantly. Responses feel immediate. Silence feels amplified. What might seem trivial to an adult can feel emotionally significant to a young person navigating belonging in real time. Many young people now experience a substantial portion of their social lives online. Friendships form in gaming servers. Romantic interest begins in private messages. Creative collaboration unfolds in group chats. That means vulnerability does not necessarily look like isolation. A child may appear socially connected while still being emotionally alone inside a private conversation that has gradually shifted in tone. There is also a generational asymmetry that complicates oversight. Adults often underestimate how fluid digital communication has become. Conversations move quickly from public forums to direct messages, from one platform to another, sometimes within minutes. By the time a parent becomes aware of an interaction, it may already exist in a space that is encrypted, disappearing, or account-based under a different username. Shame is another central factor. Police advisories across Canada consistently note that victims delay reporting because they fear punishment, embarrassment, or disbelief. In sextortion cases, the threat of image distribution weaponizes that fear. The potential audience is imagined as limitless: classmates, teammates, family members. The humiliation feels immediate and irreversible, even when the legal reality is more complex. Recent reporting trends also reveal shifting patterns. While girls have historically been more frequently targeted in grooming cases, Canadian police have warned that recent sextortion waves have disproportionately affected teenage boys, often through rapid and financially motivated manipulation. The tactics differ slightly, but the emotional impact, isolation, fear, silence, remains consistent. Community context influences disclosure as well. In smaller communities, reputational anxiety can intensify reluctance to report. In larger urban settings, digital anonymity may increase exposure. Regardless of geography, the internal response is similar: confusion, self-blame, and hesitation. Most importantly, the transition from attention to coercion is subtle. It does not feel like a crime in progress while it is unfolding. It feels like a relationship that slowly becomes uncomfortable and then frightening. By the time fear replaces validation, the young person may already feel responsible for what has happened. Understanding the mechanics matters. Understanding what makes them possible is what allows prevention to move from reaction to recognition. The pattern we've outlined is not theoretical. It has surfaced in Canadian investigations over the past 2 years, prompting public warnings from police services across multiple provinces. In Halifax, municipal authorities issued a release referencing youth involvement in what they described as 764 and the COM network. The statement emphasized that these networks operate worldwide and connect with children, youth, and vulnerable adults through the chat features of common online social media and gaming apps, and are not hidden on the dark web. The accessibility is part of the concern. In New Brunswick, the Mounties reported that a youth associated with what they referred to as the 764 network was placed on a peace bond following an investigation involving national security enforcement units. Because the matter involved a minor, proceedings were shaped by the Youth Criminal Justice Act, which prioritizes rehabilitation and limits public disclosure. In Ontario, Durham Regional Police issued warnings tied to school investigations involving online coercion networks targeting students. These cases, however, represent only one slice of a broader landscape. Canadian police have repeatedly warned about organized sextortion rings operating internationally. In many of these cases, the structure is rapid and formulaic. A fake profile posing as a teenager initiates contact, escalates intimacy quickly, obtains an image, and immediately pivots to threat. Teenage boys have been disproportionately targeted in recent waves. The demand may be financial, or it may involve further images. The speed is intentional. Panic limits resistance. Beyond sextortion rings and comm-style coercion clusters, there are also online extremist recruitment spaces that exploit similar mechanics. While not always focused on sexual exploitation, these environments use the same progression: validation, private migration, ideological bonding, to draw vulnerable youth deeper into violent or harmful subcultures. Canadian national security advisories have acknowledged the presence of violent online groups exploiting digital platforms to recruit youth. There is also the long-standing criminal infrastructure of organized child sexual abuse material distribution networks. These tend to operate more covertly and are often targeted through coordinated international investigations. While they may not recruit openly in youth-facing environments, they form part of the broader ecosystem law enforcement confronts. Across all of these categories, sextortion rings, decentralized coercion clusters, extremist recruitment spaces, and organized exploitation networks, several themes repeat. First, some individuals involved are themselves teenagers, sometimes victims, sometimes intermediaries coerced into recruiting others. This complicates prosecution and shifts some matters into youth court, where privacy protections apply. Second, digital infrastructure frequently extends beyond Canadian jurisdiction. Accounts may be operated abroad. Data may be stored outside the country. Investigators often rely on international cooperation to obtain records. Finally, enforcement is reactive. A report is made. A school notices concerning behavior. A parent contacts police. By the time authorities intervene, digital evidence may already be fragmented across multiple platforms. Canadian law provides tools: child luring provisions, extortion charges, offenses related to intimate images. But applying those tools in decentralized, encrypted, and transnational environments presents operational limits. The label may change, the platform may evolve, the tactics remain. What law enforcement is confronting is not a single organization, but a pattern of exploitation that adapts to whatever digital space youth inhabit next. And that adaptability is what makes disruption ongoing rather than definitive. Where does responsibility begin? Major platforms operating in Canada have introduced reporting systems, automated moderation tools, parental controls, trust and safety teams, and AI-driven detection systems designed to identify abusive material. Yet billions of private messages move across digital ecosystems every day. The scale of communication far exceeds the capacity of proactive human review. In most cases, moderation still depends on user reporting or automated flagging systems, both of which operate after an interaction has already occurred. Canadian criminal law addresses conduct. It does not easily regulate architecture. The criminal code contains provisions related to child luring under Section 172, extortion under Section 346, and the non-consensual distribution of intimate images under Section 162. Charges can be laid. Peace bonds under Section 810 can impose conditions before further harm occurs. But these tools are reactive. They are triggered by evidence, and evidence must first be preserved. Intervention typically begins only after harm is reported. Investigators must secure digital records, obtain production orders, and in some cases coordinate with foreign jurisdictions if data is stored outside Canada. Mutual legal assistance treaties can facilitate cross-border cooperation, but they operate on procedural timelines. The pace of exploitation may unfold in hours. Legal processes often take significantly longer. Encryption presents an additional tension. End-to-end encrypted messaging protects privacy for millions of users engaging in lawful communication. At the same time, it can limit the visibility of harmful exchanges unless one participant reports them. The balance between privacy and safety is not rhetorical. It is structural. Law enforcement agencies have acknowledged the operational difficulty of accessing communications that are deliberately designed to resist interception. Youth cases add further complexity. When minors are involved as suspects or intermediaries, the Youth Criminal Justice Act prioritizes rehabilitation and privacy protections. That framework serves important public policy goals, but it can limit the amount of public information available about investigations and outcomes. As a result, enforcement activity may be more substantial than public reporting suggests. Platform design itself shapes risk. Frictionless account creation, anonymous usernames, disappearing messages, private invite links, and algorithmic amplification all support rapid connection. None of these features are inherently harmful. They enable legitimate community building at global scale. However, when combined with anonymity and minimal identity verification, they can reduce traceability in cases of abuse. In recent years, Canadian policymakers have debated stronger online safety legislation aimed at addressing platform accountability for harmful content and exploitation. These discussions reflect a broader recognition that criminal law alone cannot resolve architecture-driven risk. Enforcement can disrupt individual actors, but structural vulnerabilities remain if platform incentives prioritize engagement velocity over friction. Accountability, therefore, is layered. Offenders are criminally responsible for coercion and exploitation. Platforms are responsible for safety design and response systems. Parents and schools are responsible for literacy and open communication. Governments are responsible for legal frameworks and regulatory oversight. When one layer weakens, the protective net thins. The central challenge is not the existence of law. It is the speed and scale at which digital interaction now operates. The same infrastructure that enables global connection also enables private contact with minimal friction. That tension defines the enforcement environment, and it is unlikely to disappear. There is no single safeguard that eliminates risk. Blocking one app does not remove vulnerability. Deleting one account does not eliminate access. Young people migrate between platforms quickly, and digital culture evolves faster than parental controls can keep up. What consistently reduces harm is literacy. Young people who understand grooming tactics are more likely to recognize early warning signs. They are more likely to question requests for secrecy, sudden migration to private messaging, or flattery that feels excessive. Teaching children what manipulation looks like before they encounter it shifts power early in the interaction. But literacy cannot rest solely with children. Parents often underestimate the layered architecture of digital platforms. A game is not just a game. It may include public chat, private messaging, voice channels, friend requests, and external links. A social media app may include disappearing messages, alternate accounts, or private group invitations. Understanding how these features function allows parents to ask better questions. Not just, are you safe, but who can message you? Are your chats public or private? Do messages disappear? Open communication matters more than silent monitoring. Surveillance without dialogue can push behavior underground. A young person who believes their phone will simply be confiscated if something goes wrong is less likely to disclose early warning signs. Regular, low-pressure conversations about online life, friends, conflicts, trends, normalize disclosure before crisis emerges. Language also matters. Instead of focusing only on stranger danger, parents can discuss manipulation tactics directly. Mirroring, secrecy requests, pressure framed as loyalty, sudden urgency. Framing these as predictable tactics rather than personal failures reduces shame. Shame is leverage in most coercive situations. When a young person fears punishment or blame, silence feels safer than disclosure. Making it explicit, repeatedly, that they will not be punished for coming forward weakens the power of threat. In sextortion cases especially, early reporting can significantly limit harm. Practical guardrails can also help. Setting devices to private by default, limiting who can initiate direct messages, disabling unknown friend requests, and keeping devices out of bedrooms overnight are preventative strategies that reduce isolation's windows without eliminating independence. The goal is friction, not fear. Schools play a role as well. Digital citizenship education that moves beyond generic warnings and into real-world scenarios increases awareness. Clear reporting pathways within schools create additional layers of safety, particularly when peers notice concerning behavior. A Canadian website known as CyberTip accepts anonymous reports in Canada, and local police services maintain cybercrime units equipped to respond to online exploitation. Reporting early increases the likelihood that images can be traced, accounts can be suspended, and escalation can be interrupted. Prevention is not panic. It is preparation built on literacy, communication, and layered protection. And layered protection is what reduces risk when no single safeguard can eliminate it. There is a tendency when stories like this surface to look for a single villain, a single platform, a single group, a single failure that explains everything. But what we've traced tonight is not a single event. It is a pattern, one that repeats quietly across provinces and across platforms. Most online exploitation does not present itself as a crime in progress. It presents as a conversation. That subtlety is what makes it difficult to recognize in real time, and even harder to interrupt once it begins. For parents listening tonight, the goal is not control, it is connection. The most effective safeguard is not a new app or a stricter filter, but an environment where a child feels safe disclosing something uncomfortable early. Ask questions about how platforms work. Talk openly about manipulation tactics. Make it clear that coming forward will not result in punishment. Silence is what coercion depends on. If this episode made you uncomfortable, that reaction is not outrage, it is recognition. Discomfort often signals that something familiar has shifted into clearer focus. It means the mechanics we've discussed no longer feel abstract. They feel possible. Recognition is where prevention begins, because prevention does not start with control. It starts with awareness. Awareness of how conversations shift. Awareness of how secrecy is introduced. Awareness of how validation can turn into leverage. When parents recognize the pattern, they ask different questions. When educators recognize the sequence, they notice different warning signs. When young people recognize the tactics, they are less likely to internalize blame. Recognition reduces shame. It reduces hesitation. It reduces the silence that coercion depends on. And when silence weakens, intervention becomes possible earlier, before escalation becomes control. That's it for tonight, everyone. Thanks for being here. Until next time, take care of each other.